I've been saying this wrong for years. Can the Squidbillies control time? The Ijtikri are a species which were conquered by the Vesk with very minimal effort. They did, however, benefit from their conquest, gaining massive upgrades to their technology, their research, their lifestyle, which they were enlightened by with the Vesk. However, the Ijtikri were also in possession of an artifact that was so powerful they were too afraid to use it. Let's hope that the Vesk, who are now in possession of this, also are too afraid to use it. Let's talk about the Ijtikri. Let's talk about what they're like before the Vesk invasion, and we can talk about the artifact that they were in possession of, which may have the ability to control time. Speaking of control, let's talk about today's sponsor, NordVPN. If you don't know, a VPN is a virtual private network. Basically, what NordVPN does, they protect your IP addresses. So third parties, your internet service providers, even government agencies can't get easy access to your data. You can also change locations. So if you want to watch a show on Netflix in the UK or in Canada, for example, you just click the location button and suddenly you're Canadian, eh? NordVPN can be used across multiple devices. Your cell phone, your computer, your tablet. Everything needs to be protected. And NordVPN is offering you a 63% discount on your annual subscription if you use my link in the pinned comment or the description below. So please check it out. It definitely helps out the channel, and you also gain the peace of mind knowing that your devices are protected. And now back to the video. If you're unfamiliar with Starfinder, what is an Ijtikri? They are a playable species within the world, the galaxies, the multiverse of Starfinder. They are native to the planet Vesk 2. Originally, it was called Iji, I-J-I. The Ijtikri are sapient beings that resemble a squid, basically. They have long, odd-shaped bodies. They have arms, tentacles, and they also have multiple eyes. An Ijtikri's head is generally close to the ground, and with also being so close to the ground, they also have an array of sensory tentacles. Sensory feelers, basically. They have an eye on each side of their head, as with most humanoids. They have 3 dorsal eyes as well. They also have a pair of eyes on the top of their trunk. Now, this allows them to see things from outside of cover without exposing their body. These eyes are probably the most complex, so they gain the most information from these. I wouldn't say that they're like infrared or anything like that, but they probably see in a spectrum of colors that is beyond that of a normal human eyeball. Now, this species, even though their head is close to the ground, this does not mean that they are not tall. An average squidbilly can be 5 to 6 feet tall. That's about 150 to 180 centimeters tall. They also weigh on average 80 to 160 pounds, or approximately 35 kilograms to 70-ish kilograms. The age of maturity for a squidbilly is quite young by human standards, and that is the age of 2. This age of maturity is unsurprising simply because squidbillies don't have that long of a lifespan. It is 40 years plus 2d20 years. This means that they have a maximum lifespan of 80 packed years. Now, aside from the tentacles and the eyeballs everywhere, the squidbillies do have other physical appearances, other physical traits, such as a shell that covers the top of their head. They also generally have an exoskeletal lattice, and this protects their upper frame. It was this shell that gave the Ijtikri a nickname from the Vesk, Stone-Faced Squid. The Ijtikri are also very adaptable. Now, when I say this, I mean as a species. They have many genes that tend to be activated from external influences, outside sources that let them adapt better to their environment. It also has the side effect of changing their colors. Speaking of changing colors, if you wouldn't mind hitting the thumbs up button on this video to let me know that you are enjoying the Squidbillies, I would greatly appreciate it. And if you want to get more Starfinder content, more Starfinder lore from myself, then please hit subscribe with the bell notification. I would love it if you joined me at the table. If the Squidbillies reach age of maturity at the age of 2, what happens to them before they turn 2? How does a baby Ijtikri turn into an adult Ijtikri? survival of the fittest. An Ijtikri hatches in the water as a free floating egg. As with the Great Circle of Life, unfortunately, not all of those eggs get a chance to hatch. Those that survive, they do hatch. And the larvae, they feed on the zooplankton, or the microbacteria that live in the waters in which the Ijtikri has hatched. Once they consume, once they grow, they begin to take on bigger challenges for more sustaining food. As the Ijtikri is growing, they will eventually migrate or move to rocks or reefs, and they will anchor themselves in the reef, continuing to feed until they go through their metamorphosis. Shell-covered squid face with the tentacles and the eyes, and this is how we get an Ijtikri. As I've been going through this, I've been reading this backwards. It's Ijtikri. I've been saying this wrong for years. Bruh. One problem that you may have noticed when talking about the life cycle, the mating cycle, they really don't get a lot of social interaction. And this shows when they come out of the waters, because they have zero social skills. They have many instinctive skills. They are good hunters, but this is solved through community. The now matured Ijtikri, they will congregate and they will welcome any newcomers into their fold, into their group. Generally, what happens is these mating grounds are also serviced by other mature Ijtikri who have learned how to speak and communicate, and they teach the newcomers basically how to talk. Adult Ijtikri are known to mate several times over their lifespan. It's when they die, however, that new Ijtikri are actually formed or released into the world. Basically, any of this genetic material, when a Ijtikri copulates, it is stored within inside themselves until they are ready for their final transformation. Now, in their final transformation, basically, that genetic material is released to the eggs that they have stored inside of them. Their body fills with a gas and it expands. They become lighter than air. As a result, they float into the air, and then they try to get themselves to a nearby body of water, preferably something that has some meaning to the Ijtikri. The body then descends into the water, the eggs are released, and a new generation is born, which also can feed off of the body of the host. Other creatures that exist within nature around the area will also get to feed on this. The Ijtikri look at this as a noble sacrifice. Through their passing, a new generation is born, and their body goes to sustaining the ecosystem around it. Now, there have been some medical advances within the healthcare system, especially where it comes to the Ijtikri. They don't necessarily have to go under their final transformation. Smaller batches of eggs can be fertilized before any of this happens, and then they don't need to go through this final metamorphosis. But you do have those hardline traditionalists who are unwilling to go through that process, at least the medical one anyways. The Ijtikri started out as nomadic hunters. In the history books of their species, about 6,000 years ago, they learned how to craft stone tools, and this allowed them to further advance as a species. They started building villages, they started learning agriculture, they started farming, they started horticulture. They had started learning how to defend themselves, and they used this mostly to fend off predators. All of this was going swimmingly except when the Vesk showed up in their spaceships. The Vesk invaded the planet, conquered the planet in 3,226 pre-Gap. That's 3,000 years before the Gap, and then the Gap, which was also about 1,000 years. Using iron swords, rock axes, and stones, basically against guns and spaceships, it didn't take long for the planet to fall. The Vesk were actually able to conquer the planet within 2 years. This would also mark the very first planetary conquest of the Vesk, taking over a whole new world. It would take them nearly 3,000 more years to complete their galactic conquest. However, the Ijtikri, they adopted the Vesk as their basically surrogate family. Those who stayed on the planet went into farming, they helped progress the Veskarium Empire. Vesk 2 is home to some of the Veskarium's biggest fishing industries, as well as salt production and Defrex farming. In the Ijtikri conquest, the Vesk found it very strange that It was easier to take over the cities than it was to take over the holy sites for the Ijtikri. They defended those most fiercely, and this is where some of the worst battles were fought. These locations were sacred to the Ijtikri. They were nothing more than basically paved plazas, and that's kind of what the Vesk treated them as. However, they were so important to the Ijtikri that they wouldn't even set foot on them. The Vesk, they started exploring their new planet, their new conquest. They started raiding these holy places, investigating the insides. And while many places had nothing of note, nothing of interest to them, there was one particular island, the island of Trafodi, which was likely one of the most holy places to the Ijtikri. It still had intact edifices that were created during the time of their ancestors. Within this island, the Vesk discovered something in a deep vault. Later, it would be called the Trafodi Paradox. Some ambitious Vesk decided to transport this artifact from Vesk 2 to Vesk Prime. It never actually made it there. One theory that exists, it was stolen by the Swarm, though there is another possibility. Rumors within the darkest places of the infosphere, within the inner workings of deep cults, they speak of another possibility. But I'm going to keep you guessing until we talk about the Trafodi Paradox first. The Trafodi Paradox is an intricately carved red orb. It was carved out of coral, seemingly out of coral. It is also 1 foot in diameter. Within the carvings on this sphere, there is a multi-layered lattice that exists within the framework of this sphere. Furthermore, despite its size and appearance and seeming density, it actually doesn't weigh that much, so the Trafodi Paradox is pretty light. The Ijtikri holy people, they had a legend that was passed down about Trafodi Island. It involved the Trafodi Paradox, but there is literally nothing written down. The legend goes that sometime during the gap, the Trafodi Paradox was delivered to the Ijtikri people, or at least this holy spot, from the sky. Being that it was so important, possibly dangerous, it was then sealed away, and all of this happened during the gap, so no one can remember it. Some minor studies were done on the Trafodi Paradox, however, nothing substantial was ever recorded or written down. When it was loaded onto the Vesk ship bound for Vesk Prime, a distress call was heard shortly after takeoff from the spaceship. The crew, they claim that they met the Swarm, and the ship was never heard from again. There have been investigations by Veskarium mystics into this artifact to figure out what it was. Through the accounts of those who did get to do a little bit of study, a little bit of research on it, what is widely believed is that the Trafodi Paradox is a transportation device. The scary thing, however, is that this device is either malfunctioning or functioning exactly as intended, and no one knows what that is. If it's not broken and functioning as it's designed, then it's probably from an alien species with goals that were too sophisticated for the rest of us mere humanoids to understand. I will leave a link in the description below for the Trafodi Paradox to the archives of Nethys if you wanted to do some more reading on what this thing actually does, how it functions. If it makes a good MacGuffin for your games, then check it out. The short version, however, is that the Trafodi Paradox creates a black hole, a singularity. It is just a small singularity, though the size can vary by a few feet. It doesn't last very long. Everything gets pulled towards the center of the singularity within 120 feet. If you have the unfortunate situation of being pulled to the center of the singularity, you will find that gravity is trying to crush you and to kill you. If you die in this singularity, you are utterly destroyed. You are gone. There is no chance for resurrection for you. If you do manage to survive being in the center of the singularity, it is said that there is a voice that reaches out to you. There is something, some presence in the void. And standing in the void, you can finally hear it. This voice offers salvation. It offers freedom. If you were standing in the center of this, would this be something that you would accept? Let's hope that you never have to make that decision. After using the Trafodi Paradox and the singularity collapses in on itself, you could either regain control of the paradox, or it could just vanish and reappear somewhere else in the galaxy. Now, the second theory that's connected to the Ijtikri and the Trafodi Paradox is this. It is somehow connected to the dimension of time. One thing that is known about the dimension of time is the fact that it has protectors, known as the Hounds of Tindalos. The Hounds are otherworldly hunters, and I say this in the truest sense of the word. They are outsiders completely. They live on the fringes of time and space. These hounds can treat angles as doorways, and they are not bound by the conventions of time. If you are going to see a Hound of Tindalos, first don't, but they first appear as smoke and then they coalesce together. A hound's job is to track down those who have gone beyond the bounds of reality and kill them. They're not very fond of time travelers. Some who have even misused the drift have even been known to draw out a Hound of Tindalos. The Hounds of Tindalos, they also pursue a very old enemy to them, and that would be the Yithians. They're not the point of this video, but they are important to the Hounds. The Yithians basically threw their minds into space and inhabited new bodies, and this is one thing that draws the ire of the Hounds. They generally don't like body swapping or trading places, trading consciousness. And because the original Yithian homeworld was doomed and they tried to escape this, they are also enemies to the Hounds of Tindalos. Tying all of this back to the Veskarium, to the Trafodi Paradox, tales exist among the Veskarium, among the whispers, the back channels, of a giant hound known as the Thing Beyond Time. Sometimes these gargantuan creatures are discovered on the fringes of black holes for reasons we may never know. One story does exist, and it's not on the official report. While the Vesk ship was traveling with an artifact that it had procured from Vesk 2, this same giant hound that they had been seeing on fringes of black holes was spotted inside the Vesk ship. While the Hound of Tindalos is not something that you can actually play, it's not a playable species, the Vesk are, and so are the Ijtikri. To start off, you're going to get a few ability score adjustments. +2 con, +2 wisdom, and -2 intelligence. Because of their hardened shell, the Ijtikri also have 6 hit points, so they're kind of beefy that way. The Ijtikri are medium-sized. They are also, however, considered aberrations. They also have dark vision for up to 60 feet. The Ijtikri also have a hardened shell. This gives them a +4 circumstance bonus against critical hit effects. And they also get damage reduction on critical hits. The Ijtikri also have a swim speed of 30 feet, which is nice. They have a land speed of 30 feet, but they can crawl up to half of this speed. They also get a free feat when they start, and this one is called Kip Up, and this allows you to basically stand up from prone as a free action. Now, while the particular color of your Ijtikri defines where you came from, as this is how they evolve essentially, this does have a mechanical impact on you. Depending on your color, you will gain +2 to a specific skill, and a spell-like ability which you can use once per day. Indigo is +2 to stealth and keen senses. Crimson is +2 to diplomacy, and then they get the share language spell-like ability. A gray Ijtikri, they gain +2 to survival, as well as the Wisp ally spell-like ability. If you are looking for something outside of the box, or you want to adjust your Ijtikri in some way, then Near Space has you covered. Page 131 says this, that if you're going to use an Ijtikri, you can have these ability score adjustment modifiers instead. Battleborn, +2 strength, +2 con, -2 to intelligence. They can also take amphibious. This gives them a better swim speed. In 3-dimensional space, they don't take the penalties for being off kilter. Doing this instead does replace Ijtikri movement. Your Ijtikri could also be a different color. There is the colorless Ijtikri. This would give you a +2 racial bonus to your sense motive skill and life bubble as a spell-like ability. The emerald Ijtikri will gain +2 racial bonus to the life science skill. They also gain command as the spell-like ability to use once per day. It's possible to have a gold Ijtikri. They are very rare though. If you are choosing to play one of the golden chosen few, you will gain +2 to your medicine checks. You will also gain the remove condition as a spell-like ability. When it comes to Starfinder, the packed worlds get most of the attention, and you will find that the Veskarium itself isn't nearly as big of a focus. But being that this species exists within the Veskarium, if you want to learn more about the Veskarium, don't worry, Papa Maple's got you covered. Thank you to all of my patrons for supporting me and voting on this video topic today. If you want to get a say in what I produce, then please consider joining us over on Patreon. My name's Nathaniel. Thanks for stopping by, everyone.